I became Tony Blair's chief of staff in opposition. Prior to that, I had been a diplomat in the British Foreign Office. I was at the embassy in Washington. And I certainly spoke to Tony Blair before I took the job. I had to, otherwise how would I know I was going to get the job? Anyone who applies for a new job knows you have to talk to the people you're going to get the job at before you actually take the job. So that seems to me self-evident. So that's what I did, and no one actually made any fuss about me switching from the British Foreign Office into the role of leader of to the chief of staff to the leader of the opposition. And although I was much more junior and I was much further away in Washington, not at the centre of government, it seems to me the principle is the same. So I don't really understand what this is about. And this report sounds to me like, as far as it is a report, this ministerial statement sounds much more like it's a political game by the government trying to play politics with this rather than anything serious.
So nobody at the time raised questions about whether you were taking the darkest secrets of the embassy in Washington to the then leader of the opposition?
I was trying to take the darkest secrets of how Bill Clinton had won the election in the United States, which is what I've been working on at the embassy to help them. No one made any fuss. And there've been many such transfers. Think of Douglas Hurd, who went from being a British Foreign Office official into being a Conservative MP. Through our history, there are lots and lots of people who make this transition. It seems to me the Conservative politicians are trying to make an issue of this when there really isn't one. The only issue here is, will she abide by the rules of the Advisory Committee on business appointments? And she and Keir Starmer have made it clear that she will. So I really think that's end of story, personally.
Well, the question is, if she was part of this team that was looking into propriety and ethics at a time that there was still a lot of fallout from the whole Partygate investigation, and she was talking to Labour officials at the time, surely that could be seen as a potential breach of the code covering senior civil servants.
I don't think so. I think, as Keir Starmer made clear, I'd be very surprised indeed if Sue had broken any rules. I know Sue Gray, and she worked when we were in government in the Cabinet Office, and she was always scrupulous and always balanced on these things. So I'd be extremely surprised if there's anything at all untoward in what she did. And of course, civil servants have to speak to opposition politicians quite often on their work, and she will not have been sharing any secrets from what she was doing there with the opposition. So I very much doubt there's anything to this at all.
If, as seems likely, there is a further delay suggested by ACOBA, the body that oversees this, before she goes to work for Sir Keir Starmer, is that a problem for him? I'm sure as when you were working with Tony Blair in opposition, and when it seemed very likely that Tony Blair was going to be the next Prime Minister in the run-up to 1997, as Chief of Staff, you will have had lots of discussions with senior civil servants about this transition process. I mean, is that going to be difficult for her, given all the row that we're in the midst of at the moment?
Well, obviously, the longer the delay they put in place, the harder it's going to be as we get close to the election. Because I think it's a very good thing that Keir Starmer has appointed Sue as his chief of staff. It shows that he's serious about government. He's serious about preparing for government and thinking about how to organise things if and when Labour wins the elections. So I think it's a good thing that he's appointed her, and the longer that they have to wait for her, the worse that is. Normally, ACOBA has about a 6-month delay. I had, for example, when I left government after being chief of staff, there's a 6-month prohibition on working anywhere afterwards, so I had to write a book instead. That seems reasonable enough. But if they start extending it and making it a year or whatever, that does seem to me pretty unreasonable and might even be considered political. But she and Keir Starmer have said they'll obey those rules, so that's what they'll do.
And just finally, I know you said that there was never any problem when you went from being a diplomat, a civil servant effectively, to working for the leader of the opposition. But I mean, Sue Gray was right there, perhaps the most high-profile civil servant that many people can remember during the Partygate inquiry, and then going to work for Sir Keir Starmer, as she still, as we understand it, hopes to do. What about the charge from senior Tories that this undermines the reputation of the civil service, which of course has an absolute fundamental duty to be impartial?
Well, I don't see how this is different in principle from what I did, from what Ed Llewellyn, who was David Cameron's chief of staff, did, what Douglas Hurd did, what a series of other people did, where they made that transition. Now, if there's a different rule for very senior civil servants, then there needs to be a very different rule for senior civil servants, and I'm not at all clear where that rule's written down. I think the fact that she's making this transition is absolutely fine. And as I say, it was reflected in what's happened before. I think this is simply an effort by some Conservative MPs to make politics out of something that really shouldn't have politics made of it.